Is a very interesting topic that we're covering. We're going to be discussing ADUs, and today we have Seth Phillips from ADU Gold. I'm also joined by my co-host Adam Smith, who's going to be assisting with some questions. And so without further ado, let me introduce Seth. So his background is in ADU development. He's done some recent projects, which hopefully we can cover in this. And he is more of a resource now for those investors out there that are interested in beginning into, taking a project that perhaps you're looking at more only as a fix and flip, but now you have an opportunity to be a little more creative and increase that value. And if you have any rental properties, perhaps there's some additional value that you can bring to it with ADU development. And so, Seth, without that, let me pass it over to you if you'd like to introduce yourself, and then you can share your screen for your slides that you have.
Fantastic. That sounds really good. Thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. So I'm going to get into this slide right now. And here we go. Great. So welcome to our presentation, how to double your multifamily income with ADUs, which, by the way, for people that don't know, is an acronym for accessory dwelling units. My name is Seth Phillips, also known as Mr. ADU, and I really appreciate you joining us today. Okay, I'm going to walk you through a slideshow that will explain how you can make money, and I mean big money, by following the step-by-step instructions you'll receive during this presentation. I'm really looking forward to sharing all this information with you today, but it's a lot to talk about and it's a lot to learn, so I'm going to offer everyone that stays to the end of our presentation a very special gift to help you blast off on your ADU journey. So here we go. Now this whole webinar can be summed up in just one sentence. That's right, one sentence. You have the right to build 3 or more ADUs on your property, period. No planning department, no public meetings, no asking pretty please. It's your right, okay? Well, that's great, but that doesn't mean anything if you don't act on it. Now, I'm going to explain to you how to do it, but it's up to you to make it happen. So let's get started right now. So just a quick background of me. I'm originally from Minnesota, you betcha, but I've lived in Los Angeles for about 35 years now. I've been a broker agent in LA for about 30 years. And I went into the real estate construction development world about 12 years ago when the market crashed and I didn't have a job as a real estate agent anymore. And we started off flipping homes, mostly in South Los Angeles. Now we were buying them at the courthouse steps and for 140 and reselling them for 180. Had to do a lot of volume to make any money doing it because the margins were so small at that time, but there was unlimited inventory. Then as the market healed, we just moved up into more and more expensive development and more expensive neighborhoods until we were all the way up to the top of the construction food chain, building ground up new construction in the ultra luxury market in Beverly Hills, Bel Air, and Hollywood Hills, so on. Learned a lot during that process about construction. And because we were spec builders, of course, we always had to be very mindful of doing our math right from the beginning, making all the valuations correct, so that when we got done doing all that work, there would be a profit on the back end of that deal. So we did that for a few years. And then as we'd been in this upward appreciating market for quite some time. And as we know, the real estate market moves in cycles. It goes up and down. We've been in an upcycle for a long time, and we're just starting to get more nervous about when the next down cycle was going to happen, which inevitably it will. So we decided, instead of building our next project, another one of these mega projects, and the downside to them is that they're so complex, they take 2 or more years from start to where you can just get on the market, and a lot can happen in 2 years. So we decided to get more conservative. So my partner at that time and I bought a property in Culver City, which was a more modest product, but we were just going to knock down the existing house on it and build the biggest 2-story modern on it, which we'd had pegged for a resale price in the $2 million range, which we felt would be a safer place to be if the market did start to turn a little bit. So we bought the property for $735,000, and we hired the architect at the plans. And it was right at that time that I first heard about this new ADU concept. I was really intrigued, so I really deep dived into it. And the more I studied it, the more I researched it, the more I just came to believe this was going to be the future of real estate. And so I was able to convince my partner at the time on that project to completely switch gears. And instead of knocking that house down that was on it, we just completely remodeled it. And then in the backyard, we built the first 2-story with rooftop deck luxury ADU in the city of Los Angeles. And I'm so glad that we did, because it was a grand experiment, but it worked because we were still spec building at that time. And it basically exactly hit the mark that I had predicted it would. And we'll be talking a little bit more about that in a couple minutes. So what is the opportunity? Well, the original California state laws went into effect in 2017. And that allowed single family homeowners to add a second living dwelling on their property. And it's separate in, basically almost every way, in that it's separate utilities, separate address, separate everything. The only thing that isn't separate is they can't be sold separately. It's still just one property with 2 houses on it. So if you think about that, if it's separate addresses, separate utilities, and it's on one lot, what's that like? That's a duplex. And so in effect, it is a duplex, but it's not. It's a single family home with a accessory dwelling unit on it. And there's a lot of specific real estate and law differences between these 2 concepts, but it is in effect a duplex. So then in 2020, the government, feeling emboldened by the success of the ADU concept in that 2-year period, went back and doubled down and expanded the ADUs possibilities, and also put more enforcement teeth into the cities that many cities have basically kind of like tried to avoid having ADUs built, although they technically had to allow it because it's a statewide law, but they found workarounds on it. So, looking at the genesis of the ADU program, a bunch of smart folks got together with the idea to design smart cities with advanced urbanism. And ADUs offer the appeal of a gentle density that allows for a compromise between suburban stagnation and urban gentrification. Well, that sounds good, doesn't it? Except for Houston, we have a problem. In the state of California, we have an acute housing shortage. And the only solution to that, the only solution is to build more housing. That's pretty simple, right? However, the majority of people now live in cities. And to build more in cities, the challenge is there's basically no vacant land. It's already all been developed. So the only way to build more is to increase density. And that's where this ADU concept is brilliant, in that it does a gentle or a soft density, and it spreads it out across the whole city. So the concept of it is excellent. It's been very well received. Just in the city of Los Angeles, there's been over 14,000 permits pulled for new ADUs already. So it's well on the way to actually making a dent into this housing crisis. And this is really, really important stuff. In addition, in the new laws that went into effect this year, they added multifamily into the equation. So 2 parts of this. Under the single family thing, they upped the ante there too, because now you can add 2 ADUs to your property, a junior ADU, which has to be the conversion of some existing space, and then you can still build this new detached or attached ADU, and that ADU can be up to 1,200 square feet. Great. But the real bonanza that really changed as of this year is now in multifamily, and that's everything from a duplex on up. This is where the real new opportunity is. And it's real simple. There's 2 parts to the multifamily part. Any multifamily property, regardless of the number of units on it, regardless of the zoning on it, regardless of the size of the lot, regardless of any of that stuff, has now a by right ability to build 2 new ADUs that can either be detached or attached, and this is ground up construction, or you could even do conversion of some space. So you get 2 on any property. In addition to that, on top of that, there is now another part of this that's just amazing, because this part is unlimited ADUs, and that is the 25% conversion rule. And this simply states that you can add up to 25% more units based on your existing unit count. Remember, I said no limit. So for instance, if you have a 100-unit apartment building, under the 25% rule, you could add 25 more units to that property, plus the 2 by right ones. That's a total of 27 new units you could add to the property. Just imagine what that does to the ROI of that property. It's crazy. So if you look at it from a statistical point of view, though, actually one of the biggest bonanzas of this opportunity is on the other end of the scale, on the smallest scale. If you've got a duplex, for instance, your duplex can now, because it's multifamily, you can add 2 more units to that under the by right, new construction. So now you started with 2, now you can add 2 more, you got 4. But there's more. Under the 25% rule, you can convert existing space into a new ADU under the conversion rule. So typically, what those conversions would be in a small apartment building would be like maybe converting a rec room or storage room or an old boiler room, something like that. You could convert that in the conversion rule because that's non-living space and it already exists, which is cool, but that's a very limited opportunity. There's only so much of that space. But what put the gold in ADU gold is when they also included being able to convert garages. That's right. So now garages can also qualify under that conversion space because it's existing and it's non-living space. So you can eliminate existing parking with no parking replacement required, and you can convert it into an ADU with additionally no parking requirement for that new ADU either, as long as there is one little catch there, as long as your property is within 1/2 mile of any mass transit, which very fortunately includes a bus stop. And if you look at most cities in the country, they're almost over 80% of all properties are within 1/2 mile of a bus stop. So that's a very low bar to cross to be able to access it. So getting back to the opportunity real quickly. If you got a duplex, it's got an attached garage, right? You got to add the 2 by right ones. You got 4 units. Now you can also convert that garage into a 3rd new unit. So your duplex just became a 5-plex. Statistically, that's just like unbelievable. And that's going to create some huge opportunities for everybody out there. So keep that in mind. All right. So I'm going to quickly try to do this quickly anyway.
Hey, Seth, let me.
Of an existing project that we're working on right now in the.
Seth, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Let me ask you a quick question. I'm sorry to interrupt. When you were mentioning about the garages, I was just wondering, in your experience, do you find that garage conversions typically become more of a consistent ADU conversion out there rather than putting an additional dwelling in, let's say, the backyard?
That's a great question. And interestingly, because there's already some general knowledge already about ADUs that is slowly spread out there. And for some reason or other, when I'm talking to people, the great majority of them start their conversation with a garage conversion, because that's just like, that's kind of the image that's been painted of it. And that is an opportunity there. And it's a very good opportunity. However, when you analyze the whole spectrum of opportunity in ADU, you're probably going to find out that there are alternatives that are better. But certainly it's a huge part and always will be of the ADU world. And it is definitely the one that most people already have in their heads. That answer your question?
And you mentioned regarding the permitting process, that it's become increasingly easier. What would you say is a time frame from start to finish with the permitting process these days?
Well, the permitting process is getting easier in some aspects, but of course, since Corona came along, as in pretty much any kind of city services in particular, it has definitely slowed things down. You're looking at, just from the COVID factor, probably an extra 5 to 6 weeks in your permitting process right now. In the new law, that's one of the other changes they made, is that they required the cities, all cities in the state of California, to approve ADU applications within 60 days, which is fantastic. However, with the COVID thing going on right now, it's just not working that way. So you are still going to be looking at right now, the very probably fastest you're going to be looking at is about 3 months to 4 months is going to be a typical timeline on it right now, but that will get faster. And on that note specifically, and this literally is fresh news, I just got the notice, I believe 3 days ago, the city of Los Angeles anyway, just changed their LADBS, the Los Angeles Building and Safety Department guidelines, till now all ADUs can be filed electronically, which is fantastic. That will actually help to speed the process up, something that all projects should be done. It's so ridiculous that the LADBS is still asking everybody to bring in these giant, huge pieces of paper in rolls, 50 pounds of them, carrying around in carts to do this process, when everything should just be done with electronic documents now. So at least this is helping to start that process. But ADUs are now all eligible for electronic submissions in the permitting process.
I've got a quick question.
Sure.
So in the scenario that you were talking about, you're talking about the duplex where you can add 2 more units and then also turn garages into units. My question would be on the back side of that. When I go to sell it, do I sell it as a duplex with ADUs, or do I sell it as a 6 unit or a 4 unit with garage rooms? What's it look like for me as a seller when I go to sell?
Well, technically your property is going to be a duplex with 3 ADUs, 3 accessory dwelling units. That's what it technically is. In reality, it's a property with 5 rental units on it. So that's a 5-plex as far as I can tell. But there are some definitely some situations where that definition is going to either help you or hurt you, depending on which side of the coin you're on. In the lending world, for instance, are they going to look at that as being 4 or less, which has a different lending guideline than 5 or more? So
Yes.
far, lenders seem to be sticking with this as not creating more units. It's literally, they're just accessory dwelling units. And so they're partitioning them out in a way. And I think that overall, that probably is more pluses than it is minuses in the lending world right now. And Mike could speak more to that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll touch on that. I would say that it can cause underwriting. Well, it causes complexity within our underwriting process, and ADUs have become very popular with a lot of our borrowers. And so for us, well, I should say more for the appraisers that are out there, if an appraisal is necessary, then it can be a more complex appraisal, or at least they have to do a little more research to actually find like for like, because ADUs are still so new that the actual properties, and the data is not yet out there right now. But for us as a lender, anytime you can increase your NOI or if you can increase that rental income, then yeah, that's a phenomenal loan for us to do.
That's great. Well, that's good. And that's really one of the advantages of Mike and his product is he's got the actual flexibility to look at things from a real point of view. And he touched on it. I mean, the biggest challenge in this whole world ADU right now is with appraisers. And, you know, appraisers have a very simple job. And that is they're asked to analyze a property. They draw a little circle around half a mile around the property. They pull up all the other properties that have sold recently that are similar to the one they're appraising, and boom, they got a number. It's easy. Apples to apples, done. All of a sudden the ADU comes along and they go to do the same thing, and there are no ADUs for them to compare it to. And this unleashes a very dangerous situation because now we're asking the appraiser to think. And that can result in all kinds of amazing responses that come out of that. So they are all over the board right now, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about values in a little bit, but it's all good. It's all good. And number one, you're adding income, and there is no discounting on that. That's real dollars, and it's good as any other dollar out there for sure.